Hello and welcome to this video lesson on IELTS letter writing. In this video, you'll become familiar with IELTS General Training Writing Task 1, including different types of letters, important assessment criteria, and the common mistakes to avoid when answering IELTS General Training Writing Task 1 questions. Then we will focus on how to write informal letters. Generally, in the IELTS General Training Writing Task 1, you'll be asked to write a letter of at least 150 words. You will need to complete this task in about 20 minutes. There are two possible types of letters you'll be asked to write: a formal letter or an informal one. Formal letters are written to people you don't know, such as the manager of a company, while informal letters are written to people who you are close to, such as your friends or relatives. Although there's a third category called semi-formal letters, you don't have to worry about them because except for their opening and closing phrases, they're quite similar to formal letters. Semi-formal letters are written to people you know but don't have a close relationship with. For example, your boss. So formal and informal are all you need to learn. The General Training Task 1 always follows the same format. There's always a scenario, which describes the situation. Then there is the recipient of the letter, which shows if you need to write a formal or an informal letter. And finally, there are 3 bullet points you need to write about. Let's look at some examples. Look at the scenario first to find out what kind of letter we need to write. A family member is coming to stay with you. He or she will be arriving by train in the morning, but you won't be home until the evening. Write a letter to your relative. In your letter, blah, blah, blah. In this example, you need to write a letter to a relative. So it's an informal letter. Let's look at another topic now. Let's read the scenario again. You successfully passed a job interview. You're expected to start on November 15th, but you will not be available on that date. Write a letter to your new boss, blah, blah, blah. Now, in this case, you're supposed to write to your boss, so the tone should be formal. However, since you know your boss, this is considered a semi-formal letter. And finally, this is an example of a formal letter. Here, you should write to the car rental company, but you don't know who exactly you're writing to. Let's look at the scenario. You rented a car from a car rental company. The air conditioner has stopped working. You phoned the company a week ago, but it still has not been repaired. Write a letter to the company, blah, blah, blah. Regardless of the type of letter you're supposed to write, you can always follow the same strategy to make sure you cover all the points in the task. Before I tell you about this strategy, I should let you know that you can write your letter in many different ways. For example, you can write your purpose together with your first bullet point in the first paragraph, or you can even mix 2 bullet points in one paragraph if the ideas are related. But for now, as a learner, try to master one strategy and stick to it. So here's the strategy. Okay, so first you start with the recipient. For example, Dear Mr. Smith. Then you will need 4 paragraphs. One to state the purpose of the letter, that is, why you are writing this letter, and 3 more paragraphs, each to discuss one of the bullet points in the task. Finally, you need to sign off and write your own name at the end. Since you have to write at least 150 words in task 1, you should aim to write about 50 words for each of the 3 bullet points. Then again, the number of words depends on the bullet points. For example, look at this topic. Write a letter to the company. In your letter, introduce yourself, explain the situation, say what action you would like the company to take. Now, in this case, the second and third bullet points will obviously require longer paragraphs compared to the first bullet point, which is only to introduce yourself. Now that you have an idea of what the IELTS General Training Writing Task 1 is like, let's move on to see how it is assessed. The assessment criteria. It is important to know how your writing is assessed in order to get a higher score. Your writing is marked based on your task achievement, coherence and cohesion, lexical resource, and grammatical range and accuracy. We're going to mainly focus on task achievement and coherence and cohesion because that's the area most students have problems with. In task achievement, the examiner is looking for these features in your letter. Is the purpose of the letter clearly presented? Are all the bullet points presented, highlighted, and extended? Is the tone of the letter appropriate and consistent? And is the format of the letter appropriate? Let's take a closer look at each of these features to make sure you won't lose marks in task achievement. Remember, you must always start your letter by clearly stating why you are writing it. The reason for writing your letter is usually just 1 or 2 sentences, but it has to be clearly presented in the opening paragraph. Make sure the purpose you present directly responds to the scenario described in the question. Let's look at examples of opening paragraphs containing a clear purpose. This is a question which requires you to write a formal letter. You have recently ordered an item through the internet but are not happy with the purchase. Write a letter to the company. In your letter, describe what you purchased, explain why you are not happy with the purchase, and tell them what you would like them to do about the situation. Read the bullet points carefully and then think of a sentence that shows why you are writing this letter. That would be the purpose of your letter. Now let's see how the purpose for this letter is written. I'm writing to express my dissatisfaction with a product I have purchased recently and to request a full refund. Now here, by saying I am writing to, the writer clearly says why he's writing this letter, which is the purpose, and that he's not satisfied with his purchase and wants to get his money back. Let's look at another example. This question requires an informal letter. An overseas friend wants to visit your country on holiday. Write a letter to your friend. In your letter, recommend the best time of year to visit and why. Describe the types of accommodation your friend could choose. Say what you would like to show your friend in your country. Now, let's read the purpose written for this letter. I was so pleased to hear that you're planning on visiting my country, so I am writing to give you some tips and advice before you book your trip. And here, notice how the writer has clearly mentioned that the reason for writing this letter is to give some travel tips and advice. IELTS General Training Writing Task 1 questions could be about various situations. Some common situations include letters of complaint, request, inquiry, recommendation, application or resignation, etc., which are normally formal, and letters of invitation, request, appreciation, suggestion, apology, etc., which tend to be informal. Whatever the situation, make sure to read the question carefully and present the purpose of the letter clearly in the opening paragraph. Another thing you must include in your letter is details about the bullet points. All 3 bullet points must be presented, highlighted, and extended in your letter. To do this effectively, you should present each point in a clear and organized manner. In other words, use a separate paragraph for each bullet point to make it easy for the reader to understand. You should also highlight key information that is relevant to each point, such as dates, places, reasons, etc. Finally, you should extend your ideas by providing additional information or details to fully address each point. Remember that some bullet points may contain more than one element, so watch out for and plural nouns. For example, in this case, the first 2 bullet points include and a plural noun types. Look at this question. An overseas friend wants to visit your country on holiday. Write a letter to your friend. In your letter, recommend the best time of year to visit and why. Describe the types of accommodation your friend could choose. Say what you would like to show your friend in your country. Now, in the first bullet point, there are 2 elements: the best time of year to visit and why it is best time to visit. So when you write a paragraph about this bullet point, make sure to provide information about both these elements. For example, I'm going to present this bullet point by writing a topic sentence about it, which is the best time to visit our country is during the summer months of June through August. Then I will highlight the key information, that is, the best time to visit and the reason for it. I think the best time of year to visit is summer, and my reasons are the weather and outdoor activities. Finally, I should extend this bullet point by adding some details like we can go hiking, swimming, and sightseeing. Look at the second bullet point now. Describe the types of accommodation your friend could choose here. So here you see the plural noun types, which means you will need to mention at least 2 types of accommodation. I'll need a new paragraph and a new topic sentence to present this bullet point. The topic sentence is, as for accommodation, there are many options available depending on your budget and preferences. I'll also need at least 2 types of accommodation to highlight the key information in this bullet point. Let's pick luxurious hotels and resorts as one type, and hostels and guest houses as another. And to extend it, I'll add some details and explanations about each type, like amazing amenities in luxurious hotels, and a comfortable accommodation and reasonable pricing for hostels and guest houses. Remember that these explanations help your letter look more realistic, as if you were actually writing to a friend. This is what will earn you a high score in task achievement. So once again, pay attention to and plurals in the bullet points so you won't miss anything. Also, by presenting, highlighting, and extending each bullet point, you will demonstrate your ability to organize your thoughts and express them clearly in a logical manner. This is an important aspect of the task and will help you achieve a high score in the IELTS exam. Let's move on to the next feature in your letter that the examiner is looking for, the tone of your letter. What we mean by tone is the style of your writing, whether it's formal or informal. So first, read the question carefully to find out which style you need to write. As I said, IELTS General Training Writing Task 1 questions have 3 parts: a situation or scenario, who to write the letter to or the recipient, and what you must include in the letter or the bullet points. If the recipient is a friend or a relative, then you need to write an informal letter. Otherwise, you need to write a formal letter. The first difference in tone between an informal and a formal or semi-formal letter is the way you start them, the greeting. In informal letters, start your letter with dear and the name of that friend or relative. For example, Dear John. In semi-formal letters, if you know the person you're writing to, start with dear followed by the title and the last name of that person. For example, Dear Mr. Smith. And if you don't know the person, simply write Dear Sir / Madam. Another difference is about the grammar and vocabulary used in the body of the letter. While formal letters contain longer sentences using more complex structures, informal letters tend to be more conversational and more direct. Look at some examples of the differences between the language used in formal letters and the one used in informal letters. Pause your video and take a look at these formal and informal structures. Play your video when you're done. Finally, you need to end your letter with a proper closing salutation, one that matches the style of your writing. Since you will only need one closing salutation, always write best wishes for informal letters, kind regards for semi-formal, and yours faithfully for formal letters. It's very important that your tone is consistent throughout your writing. Do not use a mix of formal and informal vocabulary or structures. The last point that you should consider when writing a letter is the structure or format of a letter. In IELTS General Writing Task 1, a proper format would include a greeting, for example, Dear John, followed by a comma, the main body consisting of 4 paragraphs, 1 for the purpose and 3 each for one of the bullet points in the question, a rounding off statement, for example, I can't wait to see you in Paris, a closing salutation like best wishes, followed by a comma, and finally your first name for informal letters. Please keep in mind that if you include bullet points in the middle of your paragraph or skip a line, then you're not following the correct format of the paragraph. Let's look at some examples to make this clear. For example, in this candidate's writing, there is no salutation. As it's a letter to a friend, the writing must begin with Dear John, followed by a comma. At the end of the letter, you can see that the closing salutation is also missing. The candidate needs to end the letter with a phrase like best wishes, again a comma, and finally his name. This letter is another example of having the wrong format. This one has the opening and closing salutation, and the writer has tried to cover the bullet points in different paragraphs, but it hasn't followed the appropriate format. You can see that in these parts, the writer has used bullet points in the middle of a paragraph. No matter what writing task it is, never use bullet points or even numbers in your writing like you can see here. Again, don't forget to write different ideas or bullet points in separate paragraphs. You will need 4 paragraphs for a letter in the IELTS General Training Writing Task 1. Preferably, leave a blank line after each paragraph, not within a paragraph. And this is to clearly separate it from the next paragraph. If you follow these simple guidelines, you're very likely to get a high score in task achievement. Now let's write an informal letter together. Here's the question. An overseas friend wants to visit your country on holiday. write a letter to your friend. In your letter, recommend the best time of year to visit and why. Describe the types of accommodation your friend could choose. Say what you would like to show your friend in your country. Now, as I said in the previous videos, it's crucial to plan before we start writing. The first step in planning a letter is to find out the purpose or the reason we want to write this letter. In this case, the reason is to give some travel tips and advice. So the purpose of the letter is to give my friend some information about Tehran. Then we should think of some ideas for each of the bullet points. Remember, you need to present each bullet point in a separate paragraph, highlighting the key information in each bullet point, and then extend it by adding some details and explanations. The first bullet point asks about the best time to visit and the reason for it. I'd say the best time is fall, because it's sunny but not too hot. As for the second bullet point, which is about types of accommodation, I'm going to suggest guest houses in the city center and serviced apartments uptown. Then I'm going to include the Grand Bazaar, the Milad Tower, and the amusement park next to it as places I would like to show my friend in response to the third bullet point. Finally, I need to decide on the tone of my letter. Since I'm writing to a friend, it's obviously an informal letter. Now that I have everything I need, all I have to do is put these ideas together to complete my letter. Let's start with the greeting, and let's imagine my friend's name is John. So I'm going to say, "Dear John," and put a comma. Now I should present the purpose of the letter in the opening paragraph. But before that, notice that I've added, "I am glad you've finally decided to visit Iran," to make my letter more real-like and natural. So here it is. I'm glad you have finally decided to visit Iran, so I'm writing to give you some information about Tehran to think about before you come. All right, so let's look at the first bullet point, which is our first body paragraph. First of all, I think the best time to visit Tehran is in fall, since it's cooler. Although most people travel to Tehran in the summer months, it's uncomfortably hot at that time of the year. Fall is a much better choice, especially between October and December, because it's still sunny but a lot cooler than in summer. This topic sentence is how I have presented the first bullet point. I've clearly highlighted both the best time to visit and the reason. I've also included some detail to extend it. Now let's look at our second bullet point and write our second body paragraph. As for accommodation, I can suggest a couple of options. There are some cheap places to stay, like the guest houses and the city center. They're pretty clean, and more importantly, there are bus stops and subway stations nearby, so you can easily get around. You could also stay in a serviced apartment uptown if money is not an issue. Of course, if you come in fall, there will be lots of specials online because of the low season, so I'm sure you'll find somewhere affordable. Again, I've started with a topic sentence, and I've highlighted it by mentioning two types of accommodation, and to extend it, I've provided some details about the prices and convenience. Now let's look at the last paragraph, which covers the last bullet point. Finally, I'll be your tour guide when you get here. I'll take you to Tehran's Grand Bazaar, one of the oldest markets in the Middle East. You can buy high-quality clothes at really reasonable prices there. I can also drive you to the Milad Tower, the tallest building in Iran. To add excitement, we can go to the amusement park next to the Milad Tower too. I'll present the third bullet point in this topic sentence for the last paragraph. Like the previous paragraphs, I've highlighted the key information by telling my friend what places I am going to show him. I've also given him some information about each of these places to extend the bullet points. At the end, I'll write a rounding off statement. Hope to see you soon. And a closing salutation, which is best wishes, and my name, Shahram. So here's the completed letter. Please pause your video, read the letter, and play your video again when you're done. Once again, let's review some important points you need to consider when answering an IELTS General Training Writing Task 1 question. Don't start writing your response right away. Plan it first. Don't start the letter with the first bullet point. You need to clearly state the purpose of the letter first. Remember to present, highlight, and extend all the bullet points. Remember to write in paragraphs. You will need 4 paragraphs, one for the purpose, one for the first bullet point, another for the second bullet point, and another for the third bullet point, a total of 4 paragraphs. You also need to leave a blank line between paragraphs to clearly separate them. Make sure to use the right tone. In informal letters, it's okay to use contractions. For example, can't, you're, I'm, etc. But avoid using abbreviations like cuz instead of because, or you instead of you. You should also never use text message style acronyms such as LOL or OMG. Now, to better understand what a good letter should be like and what mistakes to avoid, let's take a look at a student's writing. Here's the topic again. And here is the letter the student has written. Pause your video, read this letter, and see if you can find the problems in the letter. Play your video when you're done. As you may have noticed, the first problem with this letter is that the purpose of the letter is not clearly presented in the opening paragraph. So let's add, I am writing this letter to give you some information about when to visit, where to stay, and what to do in India to improve the opening paragraph. The second paragraph presents the first bullet point and highlights both the best time to visit and the reason. However, there isn't enough detail to support it. The last sentence is a bit vague, so I'm going to change it to, besides, in these months, there are lots of fun outdoor activities we can enjoy. Finally, the phrase, as far as the best time to visit India is concerned, is rather formal and therefore not appropriate for an informal letter. So let's change that to, about the best time to visit India, blah, blah, blah. The next paragraph includes information on both accommodation and places to visit. As I said before, to get a high score in task achievement, you need to write about each bullet point in one separate paragraph. So we'll have to divide this paragraph into 2 and add a bit more detail to each paragraph. Remember, it's best if all 3 paragraphs are the same length, if possible and appropriate. Finally, the closing salutation is too formal again. Let's replace yours faithfully with best wishes. All right, now pause your video and read the revised letter. Let's take a look at another sample written by a student with a different topic. Here's the topic. Your friend invited you to his party, but you are unable to attend. Write a letter to your friend. In your letter, explain why you can't go, give your reason for not contacting your friend sooner, suggest another time to meet. and this is the student's writing. Pause your video and read this sample written by a student. Together with your partner, try to detect the problems. Unlike the previous letter, this one contains a purpose in the opening paragraph, but it's not really clear. To make the purpose of the letter clearer, I'm going to include, I am writing this letter to tell you that blah blah blah. Now we have a clear purpose. The next problem is that the first bullet point should be written in a separate paragraph. So first, I'm going to start a new paragraph. In the second paragraph, the writer doesn't explain why he can't go to the party, and there's too much unnecessary detail. Rather than simply saying why he's busy, he's actually describing his responsibilities at work and comparing his new position to the previous one. So I'm going to keep what's relevant and add a better reason and omit the rest. The third paragraph contains lack of time as the reason why he didn't contact his friend sooner, but it doesn't seem to be very convincing since it only takes a few minutes to reply. So I'm going to make some changes and make it more believable. The next paragraph is fine, though it's a bit too short, so I'm going to add some detail. Okay, pause the video now and read the whole letter that is revised.